If you ask a child what they want to be when they grow up, they might say things like a teacher or a dentist or, in my son's case, a construction worker. Rarely would you hear them say they want to work in photonics and handle lasers and optical sensors, but that's because they're not exposed to it. Right now, the photonics industry is booming, and we need more workers, more technicians, and more people to help develop the science. So how do we reach out to young people and expose them to this wonderful field and get them interested in what we all know and love? And for the high school and college students who are already considering a career in photonics, what do they need to do to find success in this field? At Photonics West, I got the chance to sit down with Tara Fortier of NIST. I wanted to ask her what needs to be done to reach these young people and get them exposed to a career in photonics. Does it take more involvement from big companies or a federal initiative? She shared with me her thoughts on the subject and also gave some tips for those working in the field now who are maybe looking for a way to climb the ladder. Here now her thoughts in this week's Spotlight Conversation. Welcome to Photonics West. My name is Joe Kaczynski. I'm joined today with Tara Fortier of NIST. Thank you so much for giving me the time. So Tara, we were talking before about workforce. Photonics is expanding so rapidly and we need the workforce to keep up right now. So what is the kind of the temperature that you're seeing for, do we have what we need? Where are the areas where I think we might be falling short or kind of need more people to rise to the challenge?
Okay, so I think it's a multidimensional problem. So one issue is that we don't draw on our technician force. So this is the thing that I hear people talk about all the time, is that we need technicians. And a lot of startups and a lot of companies rely on PhDs or engineers. But technicians can come through completely different avenues, right? Like community colleges, through work study programs, et cetera. And one of the big challenges right now is that as our tech industry is growing, especially in optics and photonics, but also in quantum technologies, we're starting to see that we're lacking in this technician force. And the issue is that, one is we don't have the education pipeline to bring these people into industry. So we really need things like kind of 2-year programs to be able to take people from high school and then bring them into industry with the skills that are needed. We don't necessarily know what industry needs, and so then it becomes very challenging also to develop the curriculum for these people. In addition to that is that, let's say if we're looking at, talking about lower income people, they might not know that there are really a wide breadth of good paying jobs in the photonics and optics community as well as in quantum technology that could use their skills. And so they're not seeking out, right, these educational opportunities. So currently I think people are filling these gaps by having kind of work study programs within companies, but once again, it's an outreach issue. So do these people even know that these opportunities exist? So I think it's not an easy problem to solve, but I think it's a great opportunity for the country to engage with because tech pays well.
Yeah, and I think, something like this is complex enough where there's going to be no single answer to solve it, right? But what are the ways we can discuss? Do companies need to do more out there? Is this something, federal programs should get involved in to try and reach out? Again, no silver bullet to just flip a switch and fix this, but, what kind of steps do you think we can take to attract more kids to STEM, to let them know that these fields exist and that they have very bright futures?
Right. So I think this comes down to we need better partnerships between industry and academia. Like the question is also, what role does government play? So, at places like NIST, we have some opportunities for high school students or undergraduates to actually do research, right? But that doesn't necessarily help people to become technicians. And so, yes, we need this feedback loop from industry to speak with academia, not necessarily at the high school level, right? But, at the community college level to give them an idea of what kind of skills they're needing for people so that a curriculum can be developed around that. But then once again, if you have these opportunities at the community college level, but there's no awareness for high school, middle school students around the opportunities that exist in optics and photonics, then you're not going to get those students interested in actually looking for or pursuing those kinds of degrees if and when, they come online.
So to role play for a second, I'm let's say a junior in high school. I'm considering a career. What is your elevator pitch to me to say, have you thought of photonics? If you have an interest in science, here's, in 45 seconds, how do I sell you on this career path?
Well, I'd say that, one thing that really motivates people is salary, right? It's for lower income students that don't necessarily see themselves going to something like an R1 university or doing a 4-year degree, becoming a technician or, gives these people the opportunity to do a shorter degree program, but still contribute and be part of the tech sector. So that's what I see would be what I'd say to people.
Yeah, and you say, salary, is there any kind of ballpark number where you can say, look, you can go to a 2-year school, you can train to be a technician, and in 2 years, you could get a job making X?
I have no idea what that is. I'd say if I had to give a ballpark figure, I feel like I want an industry person here to vet this, but I'd say it's probably like 70 or 80K starting salary.
But even if you are on the low end, I think the national average is somewhere around 50-something.
Yeah.
So you're saying 2 years, you can make an above average salary for what the average American is making.
Especially because right now there's a great need, right? So where there's demand, there's pay. So.
Yeah.
But I would check that with somebody.
Yes. Okay.
Just to see, because
we
I'm
won't
making
write it off yet.
Okay.
But even if we cast a wide net, if you were off by 10,000 and it was still 60, that's still well above the national average. So just security in it. We need the positions, they pay better, and we're talking 2 years. We're not talking a 4-year deal. Now for the people that are in the industry, that are in more kind of experienced levels, it can be pretty competitive in those positions to kind of make their way up and climb that ladder, so to speak. You've seen it, you've been through it, you've had some challenge, you faced the adversity, and you're here. And what would you give for advice to someone that's kind of struggling to take that next step?
What I would tell them is that it depends on where you want to go. So if you're interested in moving to a management position, if you're interested in moving towards more of a leadership position, I think the big disservice I did to myself is I kept on working on my technical excellence. So, becoming the world's best Python program is not going to necessarily move you into a managerial position. And in retrospect, this makes sense because if you're very technically excellent, people want you to stay in a technical, in a technical role. So you kind of get trapped by being very good as an individual contributor. So what was very hard for me was to realize that I need to look up from the bench, put down the power meter, and start developing these leadership skills. So that took kind of a leap of faith, right? Because what we learn in academia is that, what really gets you jobs is, if you're in academia, it's publishing papers, right? If you're in industry, it's about meeting deadlines on time and creating products. But then, moving away from that and then seeing yourself being able to do managerial work or being able to do leadership work and kind of reframing who you want to become is a big challenge. But in addition to developing these new skills, the other thing that people have to realize, and I'm going to say it, but I think it's a little bit out there because a lot of people don't think about it, is that, if you really want to expand your opportunities, it's almost as important to be a good networker as it is to be a good technical person. Of course, if you're good at both, you're unstoppable. But if you're the smartest person in the room and nobody sees you, you don't get any opportunities, right? So this is one way to understand that. And of course, for some people, they are introverts, and so networking can seem a little bit intimidating, but that is one of the important things to do. And even if you want to be an exceptional technical person, once again, networking is what's going to broaden your horizons and bring you more opportunities, even if you want to do interesting technical roles, because the more people you know, the more opportunities you have, the more you get to pick and choose your projects.
Interesting. And yeah, if you have a gear or a cog in a machine that works fantastic, you don't think to give it a second look. So these people that are just crushing it, they're relied on, okay, so now I'm not thinking about it, so maybe I'm not thinking about promoting them or advancing them.
Yeah, but if people don't hear from you, this is like another piece of it. This is something that I was deficient in, is that people oftentimes feel afraid to speak up. And the problem with that is that if you're not heard, you're not really seen. And so it takes a leap of faith to actually know that sometimes it's better to ask stupid questions than to ask no questions at all.
Gotcha. Now, is there any advice for someone that's like, I want that next step, I'm in my shell, I'm comfortable, I don't know how to just get out there and say, this is me, pay attention. Is that something you can coach, or you can kind of...
Absolutely. I have lots of opinions about that. And the thing is that there's no one way to network. But I find that, one way to think about networking is you can think of it as a safety net, right? So let's say I don't want to build my network when I've lost opportunities. I want to build it while I have opportunities, so that if, let's say, there's a reduction in force, or you lose your employment because of something, you can go automatically to your network to find opportunities. So build it before you need it. Right, so that's one way. The other thing you can think about is networking makes your job easier, right? And the way that it makes it easier is that the more experts you have in your network, the more people you can ask questions of. So this is the thing, is I don't need to be my only resource for solutions. So if somebody asks me a question about something that's slightly outside my field, I can go to my network and I can ask them, is there somebody you can refer me to who has these answers, or what is the best reference to look at here, or can you explain this idea to me so that I can move myself forward without having to rely on myself to learn everything. The other thing is that you can think about a network as friends, right? So now you have a group of peers, maybe a group of allies, maybe a group of higher level people who now become part of your community. And another way of looking at it, because I'm very service oriented, is that I actually use my network a lot to connect people to one another and to help. So, if you're seeking validation, which a lot of us do, having people reach out to you and ask you, hey, can you share your expertise with me? I have a problem. It's wonderful, right? Because I feel like I'm now in service to people. I feel like the expertise that I have is useful. And so that's another way of seeing how to network. So there's this, in terms of our approach to things, oftentimes we have mental barriers that stop us from approaching things. So if we have different ways of looking at networking, right, it's not just about selling myself or, rah, I'm the best, right? We can take these different ways of seeing how networking can support us, our community, create safety nets, etc. And then it kind of flips the script in terms of why I would start even building that network.
And I think it's funny, you said it just makes so much sense naturally that, do the networking now, have the resume ready now before you anticipate the next move, because by the time you need it, you need it to have it beforehand, right?
Yes.
So always be, is this like hey, you could love your job, you could want to stay there for a long time, but kind of always be just making connections, have the resume updated, because you never know.
Yes, exactly. And one way to start networking, because this is another problem, is that people are like, well, how do I do it properly? Right? And, they think they have to do a lot of talking. And actually, it's best not to talk that much. It's best to ask questions. So I find it much more comfortable to ask questions of people than to have people ask questions of me, right? Especially when I was more junior, because I wasn't, I didn't necessarily know what I didn't know. And so I was always worried that I had a limited scope, right? But that means that oftentimes the people that I was networking with could be kind of more senior than me, but senior people love to tell you about themselves. They love talking about their career path. They love talking about their favorite projects. And so actually, just asking simple questions, right? Like, I admire your career trajectory. Can you share some of that information with me, right? Or, this is a really great one for people seeking graduate advisors, in case anybody is looking for that, is to, you meet a graduate advisor, and this is the ultimate question, is what is your favorite project in your lab? Because guess what? That's going to be the one that's the best funded and where there's going to be the most amount of attention. So that's a life hack right there.
Hey, good tips, yeah.
Right? Or for, let's say you're looking to network with somebody in your organization, you can go to at a department head, or you can go to a manager, or you can go to a senior manager, and you can ask them about the mission of your organization, right? And a really important question to ask there is, where do you see this organization going in the next 5 years? Because then you start to get some perspective and some sense of their strategy and what's interesting to them.
So, talking about checking, does that mean I can just kind of find the top CEO at a Trump for Coherent and just LinkedIn and be like, hey, I'm Joe.
No. So it depends on the level, right? I mean, if you're going to network with one level higher than you, that's pretty easy, right? But it really does come down to having that question to ask, because that's what opens up the conversation. If you want to talk to somebody who's much higher up, then it's very useful to right, have a network so that you can ask somebody to introduce you to that person, right? Because as much as we love to think that we live in a meritocracy and it's only our demonstrated ability that will decide everything, the problem is that people have limited bandwidth. It's not that people are evil. The problem is they just don't have that much time. And so people want to talk to vetted sources. So, if a CEO has somebody who they know well, who they trust, they're more likely to take, introduction from that person than somebody they've never met before, right? Because nobody has that much time.
Sure.
And so that's why networking is important, is that people oftentimes give opportunities to friends because they don't necessarily, they don't even know how to search for the best possible person. They're not going to go and look at your GPA.
Yeah.
They're not going to necessarily go and search for their CV. They're going to use their network to help them find the person in the role that they're looking at. And so the more people you know, the more chances, right? It's just a probabilities game.
Yeah, and like you're saying, the advantage to the person looking for something new, their advantage networking is connecting for that job, but there's an advantage for the person reaching back out, right? I mean, you want to bring in young, fresh talent. You want to grow your workforce.
Yes.
So being receptive to that kind of networking.
It makes it more efficient and easier for them to do that.
It sounds, to keep that pipeline going, to keep things moving. And I think, there's some concern in the need for technicians. We have to build up, locally. If we want to be able to compete, then that's got to be there. So, talking about the importance of networking and why it matters, what are some of the important things to think about while you're networking, while you're going in that process?
So, ask questions, right? People are very open to people who are curious. And so coming with a list of prepared questions is helpful. Active listening is helpful because you'll be able to read the person's body language around things that are exciting or not interesting to them. If somebody starts to shut down with respect to a question, it's an indication, right? If I'm able to discern what's going on with them, that this is maybe not a good place to go. That's one thing. Also, the thing and with respect to body language, is that when I'm networking with somebody, it's important to understand what that person needs. So that's a very good question to ask. What does your team need? What are some of the fundamental problems that you see facing, let's say, some project, et cetera? And then you'll start to get information from that person that you can then use in your career, right? Or in developing your own projects. But what this also allows you to do is it starts to give you a sense of what the person's values are. And, if you're trying to propose something to somebody, if you understand their values, right, then you can shift your proposal to align with their values, and it will make your networking much more influential.
Right, read the room, see what garners a good response, and continue to, drill in on those. If you mention, machine vision, and they shut down. All right, we'll stop talking about machine vision, right?
Exactly.
Move on to the next one.
And the thing is that not everybody has that experience, right? If you spend, let's say, if you did a PhD and you spent 5 years in a dark lab, you might not be the best at reading the room, right? But that's why practice makes perfect. Everybody can learn these skills, and the better you are at reading people, the better you can be at understanding what they need and being able to align your requests with those needs.
Are there any places or organizations that can help people kind of sharpen these skills before you just go and try and reach out to network, or any groups that can kind of help this young professional workforce to get that foot in the door and to make those connections?
I'd say more than anything, it's just, it's identifying who you want to talk to, right? finding that first question and then really just learning how to do it. That's probably the best way, right? I mean, it is really like you could talk to people about playing piano.
Yeah.
But playing piano is more effective than talking to people about playing piano.
Yeah.
And I'll say it. I mean, there's a million books out there on leadership, etc. And the question is, why do people not take that advice and implement it into their lives, right? I mean, that's a big question. But another thing that you can do, which was helpful to me, is at some point I felt like I got stuck. I probably should have done this earlier, before I got stuck, is that there's no reason not to hire a coach. So, and I think people, especially physicists don't seem to think that way, but let's say the best sports players, the best musicians, the best athletes all use coaches for a reason, right? Because they allow you to see your shortcomings and to work on them to move forward if you're interested in that. Of course, some people are just happy where they are and they just want to have an easy, simple life, and that's fine. But I'd say that even if you got a coach and you learned about where your shortcomings are, you can choose to use that information or not. But having that information is very helpful, of course, because someday you might need it. And people always go and look for solutions when they're oftentimes in tight situations. And so why not, go and fill these gaps ahead of time so that you're prepared. And at the same time, the information that you can get from, let's say, a career coach, or from even from a relationship, with a mentor, will be helpful because you can start to see where you can apply that while things are going well.
Yeah, so there are ways to get ahead of the curve on this, and you never want to wait until it's too late, to polish the resume, to build your network. And there's no real detriment to it. There's no risk involved, right? No negative way.
Well, it can be expensive, but I mean, mentors at work can be free.
Yeah.
Allies can be free. Discussions with peers can be free. Coaches can cost money. So it really depends on where you are in your career, how much you want to move ahead, whether or not you feel like you have the money invest to do that kind of work. But yes, find mentors. Mentors are very helpful because they help you navigate the system. I'm going to tell you that oftentimes you come into a system and people show up having an idea of what the system is, and so they play to the system that's in their head instead of the reality of the system. And so that's also a good reason why you want to network, is you want to come in the door and you want to start asking questions about what are the unstated rules.
Yeah, so part of that, be open-minded to, it's okay to admit what you don't know, because you'd rather be right and find out you were wrong, right?
But also, like, the person who asks questions, people see as curious, and people love curious people, right? Yeah. Because it shows that they're taking initiative.
What is, you think, the top question you would hear from young people getting into the field of working? What is the top question they would ask to try and advance and to move on?
Well, I think the thing that they'd ask is like, what is the most important part of the mission of this group, right? Instead of making presumptions, it's important to ask, what is valued in this group, what's valued in this department, what's valued in this organization is very important, because you want to align yourself with those values. If you're not aligning yourself with those values, what you're not doing is you're not checking the boxes needed for supervisors to advance their careers, right? So everything is a little bit about, what supervisors love is people who solve problems for them that they don't have to solve themselves.
Yeah, kind of a symbiotic relationship.
Yep.
If we're going to work together, we should be helping one another out.
Exactly.
That just kind of makes sense.
Or if you're not in alignment with the values of someone, that this is an opportunity to form connection and to explain what your value system is, how you see something being impactful, why it is important, right? And then you have the opportunity to learn about developing influence, right? In terms of, making your projects heard, having people see the importance of them. That's like another completely different step. But of course, the more you network, the more you read body language, the more you work on your communication, the more likely you are to be able to make those steps for yourself and create opportunities. And that's what everybody wants. People want opportunities.
Yeah, and it just works for all parties. You can work for your employer, you can help them, like you said, solve problems, and then you find your fulfillment, the job that makes you happy.
Yeah.
What about those who are looking for a transition? Maybe you've been working in one field for so long, and you keep seeing people walk in the other part. You say, I think I'm ready to change. And that can be scary to take that new leap. What kind of advice can we give to those people who are, saying, I've been doing this for 5 years, it's just not for me anymore, I think I'd like to try something else?
Well, it's about building your network in that area, right? So usually if somebody wants to shift areas, they probably have something that inspired them to go in that area. And the question is, can you find somebody in that inspiration that you can talk to that can bring some reality to the situation? What does that career actually look like? What are the salaries that are available? What kind of skills are needed? And then I might, if I'm conservative, I might want to be like, well, I'm going to stay in this job for another year. Is there a way for me to develop those skills in my current role? Right? Do I need to go outside of my organization to start to develop those skills? Right? Once again, what are the values of that industry, or what are the needs that they have? Right? Who do I need to talk to learn more? Networking is so important.
Yeah, that's the big takeaway.
Right.
And it is, you talked about finding a mentor too, because for some people it's, I don't feel great talking to everyone, but if I had one person that I could bounce stuff off of, so how do you select a mentor? How do you find them? How do you wrangle them in to make them something that can, help you progress?
Oftentimes, if you don't know who's in your organization, talking to your peers, this is the problem. It all comes down to networking. So the best thing is just to ask people for help. I mean, people feel like they want to demonstrate excellence by showing that they're a smart individual, right? But trying to prove and understand everything yourself is highly inefficient. And at the same time, people don't necessarily see what you're doing. So you can create like technical excellence and invisibility. Whereas if you go and you just talk to someone and you say, you know what, I really am interested in learning more about the community here. I want to understand what's important, what the strategy is. Can you recommend, a person that I can talk to? Like let's say in this specific area, because oftentimes you want to find a mentor in the area that you're interested in. So let's say, maybe I'm a technical person, but I want to learn about leadership. I might not go to another technical person as a mentor, right? But you can go to another technical person and say, hey, do you know somebody in this organization who would be a good mentor for me in terms of understanding leadership, and leadership specifically that aligns with this organization and with its promotional structure, et cetera, so that I can learn how to navigate the system.
So obviously a key takeaway is networking. And one of the biggest reasons why is some people might feel, weak, or like I got to show how strong I am by doing it myself. But what you're saying here is don't go it alone.
Well, I'd say it's not for everybody, right? I mean, some people are going to go it alone because they want to be individual contributors, and that's their path, and they're happy, working by themselves and doing everything themselves. But I'd say for a lot of other people, they can feel a little bit alone and intimidated by their position, but you don't need to be alone, right? So asking others for help makes things more efficient. Like for what I see is from, if a company is excited by things like productivity, right? The more I can delegate work away by asking people for help, right? The more efficiently I can solve problems, right? Asking people to do work for me even better. But I like to frame it as, how can I create like A output with C effort? That's how a network really helps you, right? If you're all alone, it can take A effort to get an A output, right? In terms of performance. But if I can rely on and lean on and work with other people, I can put in C effort to get an A output, and that just makes my life better. And at the same time, I build my community. People know that I'm there, and I can develop opportunities for myself.
That's great, Tara. Thank you so much for all the advice, and definitely a lot of things we can take away. And probably I'm sure you can turn around and use in some everyday relationships, right? And not just
absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you again.
Okay, thank you.